Well, hello everybody. This video is uploaded on YouTube. Of course, can't do live until I have at least 1,000 subscribers. Now, I'm getting there. People are trickling in, almost 6 to 10 a day as I reach my former friends and followers from Facebook. It's the only path forward for me is to get on to YouTube and get it up running. It's interesting, as my Facebook went down, I got hammered almost immediately by EU trolls that actually are in Canada, and as well as I get this major Black Lives Matter audience, and I basically get ridiculed, called pervert, racist, child sex criminal, all of the same old. And when that didn't work, when I pushed and brushed all that aside, I was threatened my life. We can reach you, we can get you, we can murder you in Canada. That's how extreme it got. And I don't know if it was to push buttons to create racial tension or the thought of, but here's the problem for these folks who say they're Black Lives Matter. They say, because I've done lots of videos on this all through its history. I've done lots on Malcom X for African Americans, African Canadians involved in this who believe in the legacy of Dr. Malcolm X and his movement during the period of segregation in the United States and lack of independence for African countries, because many international laws hadn't even been put in place yet, not globally on the world stage, led by the United States, led by the former Soviet Union, and of course the rest of the world went ahead and voted these through and they became law. There's, of course, what was ECOSOC with political, civil, and human rights, that covenant. More is on decolonization. And it's all there. And Dr. Malcolm X was pivotal in his life, even though he never lived to see that happen. He never even lived to see the mid-60s and into the 70s, all the independent nations of Africa seeing achievement. Malcolm X did a speech to the grassroots. I'm going to go through that, as all my intellectual property is now locked away in Facebook's vault, non-public anymore, so I can't even reference any of the multitude of videos I've done on these topics, but that's okay. This video is going to be exceptional, and I hope it finds so many very well. And it actually takes us back to Richard Nixon as Senate leader in his life, his monumental civil rights achievements and movements, at the same time as even Dr. Malcolm X. Unfortunately, he was assassinated, executed, and of course it's because he had a realization from Mecca. He taught so much, he was way ahead of his time, and he articulated things very well for folks in the period of segregation. Now, I am a Canadian subject, like all Canadians, in a class-structured system of first, second, third, and sadly, a savage class. In Canada, that is not to be confused with the American Indian citizen, and the monumental civil rights achievements completed in 1975 by one President Richard Nixon. Of course, he was impeached. Ford had to finish it off, but it was all Nixon, just like it was all Nixon in actually desegregating schools in the southern U.S. It's one thing to make laws, Americans, Canadians. It's another thing to enforce those laws. Richard Nixon, President Nixon, whether people want to admit it or not, he actually physically went and opened those schools. He physically walked those buses. So if anybody wanted to be throwing moth cocktails, those African American children's buses going into what were segregated white schools, they'd have to bomb the President of the United States. And that's the reality and truth of it, whether people like to look at those realities or not. But I want to roll the clock back. I want to talk about the grassroots. The entirety of that speech and one Malcolm X, Dr. Malcolm X, he brought forward in segregation. There's no longer segregation in the United States. Yes, the African American of the time period was segregated in a class structure, and yes, as a savage class of people, not too unlike our Canadian First Peoples, who are still that way today. That system still exists in Canada, unless all First Peoples give up all of that which is them and join the third class as subjects, which are slaves. I encourage everybody to read Webster's dictionary. Don't go to Oxford, go to Webster's. That's American independence. That's how America defines it. And that's absolutely what Canada has done and always will do. Third class subjects are slaves. And to prove this point, Malcolm X told you what is revolution. Revolution is about landowners and the landless. The landlords and the landless. Now, in America, and I'm asking people here, if this isn't true, let me know, but I know it to be true that 90% of the United States of America is available as private property to all American citizens. There are only two types: American Indian citizens since 1975 and American citizens, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, sex, sexuality. You're all American citizens, and it wasn't always this way, and it was not that way in Malcolm X's time, but it was following his death, just a few years after his death, in fact, leading up through the 70s. Now, in Canada, that hasn't changed. Now, in Canada, for all Americans and BLM Canada or BLM America, in Canada, 91% of Canada is not available to any Canadian subjects or any Canadian First Peoples. In fact, our First Peoples, and who are those? Those are our numbered and named treaty Indians, all unceded Indians, those who've never signed a treaty and remain at the equivalent of American Indian War with the Canadian government. It's Canadian government and Indian wars. There's an area of Ontario. There's an area of Quebec. There's a 90% area of British Columbia. In fact, there are 20 tribal peoples that no longer are alive and exist today in British Columbia, Canada, but yet all those tribal persons are alive and well in Oregon and Washington. There's no Jay Treaty that USA honors from the time of the British Empire with all the American Indians and all Canadian First Peoples, the same peoples. America keeps that alive and well. It is not reciprocated with Canada to the American Indians. When the American Indian citizen tries to cross into Canada, he loses his American Indian citizenship and he's reverted back to an Indian savage, he or her. And you see it at the border crossing all the time, and even shoot videos, and you can see these American Indian citizens are just shocked. And it's no accident Canada does that in pure socialist fascist design, in pure segregation, in pure savage class-defined persons, which are not human beings at all. Not unlike everything that was the African American throughout their history until the end of segregation. Malcolm X's time in segregation, he told you about revolution and why, because of landowners, landlords, and the landless. He went on to tell you about the house Negro with the white landlord, and then the field Negro, who are all the landless. He goes on to tell you that. That's how it is in Canada for almost 95 percentile of the population. Only 9% of Canada is available. The rest sits with the first-class divine elite, the elected and appointed. And they will take any race, and they will create what Malcolm X called the house Negro on every other race. In Canada, we have AFN, where chiefs elected or appointed, or the appointed crown system bestowed upon them from this heinous Indian Act, sees that they all become good house Negroes for that elite first class, while everybody else is a field Negro. That's how it is always and forever will be in Canada. Our property values are beyond any measure of America. Now, we can go on coast, sure. We go, oh, no, go to Beverly Hills, go look at a $60 million mansion in Beverly Hills. Oh, yeah, 18 rooms, helicopter pad, 2 indoor pools, a tennis court, all kinds, entire theaters, right? Then you go to something like East Vancouver and you go up on the mountainside and you look at a property worth $16 million and it's a 5-bedroom house, 2-car attached garage, and it's got 4 bathrooms. That's somehow supposed to be equivalent, not even in the realm. Americans enjoy, in a place like Florida, on average $6,000 an acre. When you go to the Ontario South, which is really restricted, only 5% of Ontario is made available to Ontarians. About 4.5% is made available to Quebecois. So all of Canada's private property fits in the Florida Panhandle. No surprise that's almost the equivalent of what the United Kingdom is, because that's how we're designed. Landless. Last time I checked, African Americans can buy into any of that available land right across the United States. In fact, it's even cheaper in the southern states. I'm looking at Florida myself because it's unbelievable. $6,000 an acre. This is what Malcolm X bestowed upon the American people, especially its grassroots, the African American, in revolution, in land availability, and so very, very much more. He warned about the crown. That was the house Negro. That was exactly what he warned you all about. And I'm sorry, but this BLM, I know it is in Canada, is there. Americans for the longest time, especially Republicans, believe this to be Marxist, Leninist, or pure-on communism. Richard Nixon made that mistake. He wiretapped the Democrats, got caught, confessed, took his leave. But he wasn't wrong. He was just wrong on the actual reality. And I can attest to this because I was born in Peace River, Alberta, but I grew up in Stony Plain, Alberta. Edmonton is my home city. And in all my activism, that a lot of it was displayed on Facebook, even the Communist Party one of the oldest parties in Canada, in fact, third oldest party in Canada, is registered out of Edmonton, Alberta. That's the home base of the party, and so is the Marxist-Leninist Party. So if you ever want to go anywhere in North America and find the most groups of communists, you go to Edmonton, Alberta, because that's where it's at. I know I've dealt with them many times. Many times. But here's the problem. Canada has always been a constitutional monarchy, meaning you could never be communist or Marxist-Leninist, because that would mean pure equality of the person, right down to wages, all of it. You all get paid the same. You all get the same distribution of land or living lifestyle, and that's how communism works. That's not how monarchies work. Monarchies are a pyramid scheme of class subjects where things like diversity, equity, inclusion, that are absolutely entirely illegal in all 50 state constitutions, nearly. If not specifically said, it's nearly legal in every 50 state. It was brought forward by the 50 states. Yes, James Madison, he was the first in Massachusetts, but so was New York. In fact, the 13 colonies largely put that in place. And as the 50 states amalgamated, all those carried forward. Absolute naturalization and this implementation was seen and made absolute federally in the amendments 1790. You know, your Bill of Rights, and then the amendments subsequent of that, 1790, 1791. This is reality, and you won't find an American institution to dispute this, and you won't find any state academic institution, let alone state government, to dispute this. America does not have diversity, equity, inclusion constituted because it goes against we the people and equality of the person, meaning all people are the same, and through your pursuit of happiness, liberty, and life, the right of that, natural rights, you will find your equity, you will find your inclusion, you will see your diversity, because everyone's to be the same. I know in American history it wasn't always that way, but it wasn't just African Americans. You can go through a number of races. You can even go through white men without property. You can go through women who didn't even have the ability to vote for a very, very long time. In fact, rape in America wasn't truly addressed criminally for women until the 1975 civil rights movements, and then codifications and legal laws set into place thereafter. Of course, Canada always copies America because they don't want to get caught in their socialist fascist state. Ours came in the 80s with the 1985 criminal code, always way after America, and only when international binding laws forced it upon us and our hands were tied and bind and we had to do it. It amazes me that so many jump on things without any truth or any reality or any legal precedence to back up anything they say. Americans do have mass amounts of land availability. You have tons of land available for sale. People choose what they want to do. This is not the same for any Canadians. It's not. And unless you're in the first class or you're crown sworn or appointed or of that elite, which is usually a mass amount of global institutions and corporations registered underneath the crown. You've had many names: East India Trading Company, East Trading Companies for many crown kingdoms, that these companies still exist today. They get to go in those crown lands that no Canadian can harvest from. No Canadian can build a home there. It's literally 91% of Canada. People say, oh, Canada's so beautiful, but yet it's not available to any of the people because we're not citizens, we're subjects. We're remaining as it always was for all those field Negroes. That's how it works in Canada. People say, no, there's a tremendous amount of wealthy. Well, with this amount of resources, you would think people at 41 million would be substantially more wealthy, but it's not. In fact, Canadians are extremely more impoverished now than Americans. And you can look at the creation of millionaires, and you can watch the rate of middle class erosion, and you can look at the rate of poverty coming. Canada's way rougher than the United States. I've been all through the United States. I've seen your cities. I just recently did one as I came from Alberta all the way up to Ontario to work. Of course, I took the American way because it's cheaper, it's nicer. I did Minneapolis, St. Paul. I was in the African American communities there. That's at least on Twitter. You can see that. You can see all my works. Claudine Gay, the Harvard Dean, head of law, and what happened to her. She got destroyed, completely destroyed. I defended her. At least there's a history of that on Twitter. I was in ADL today. It was the SCOTUS Review, National Center, or Constitutional Center, NCC. They've seen what's happened to me. They brought me forward. So apparently it isn't New York Jews, that's for sure, because I was in with them today. I got an audience over my social media being destroyed. I learned the truth of the American First Amendment, what SCOTUS did this year on social media, and that I would be protected if I was American, at least under the First Amendment. But I'm Canadian, I'm a subject in a constitutional monarchy where there is no First Amendment. We have a charter, and it lists some rights that they may bestow upon you. Remember, it's first class, and they get to decide what rights you have on any given Sunday or not. It all depends on who you elect, your autocratic tyrant, and what their beliefs are, because if they don't share your beliefs, they can remove your rights and freedoms at will. It's not like the Bill of Rights in America where it's there, and then these amendments are there, and they're enshrined. In Canada, those things can be removed at the snap of a finger, gone, because we're class subjects. And depending if you're a first person defined as a savage Indian under the Indian Act 1876 to right now as I give this video, you can have all your civil and human rights removed, and they do, and they always have, and they always will. None of the division of powers bestowed upon all Americans are made available to Canadians. The powers of a state in civil rights, in property and water, in your massive state constitutions, just to name a few. There's a lot more rights there. It's no surprise that the average of the 50 states' constitutions run anywhere from 150 to 450 pages long. There are some shorter, and there are some that are even longer than that, but on average, when you look at them, depending on how they were codified in their times, 150 to no less than 450 pages long, way outpacing the U.S. federal Constitution, obviously way outpacing the Canadian Constitution. And unlike America, but like America, we are a federalism too. It was an act after the Civil War. It was a British theater, French theater, to trick Americans into, oh no, we're going to be good just like you. Oh look, we have this new dominion called Canada. We have a federalism. Oh look, there's a Section 5 for provincial constitutions. All the rights and freedoms Americans working on to getting everyone to a state of equality. We're going to get there too, but Canada never moved a day since 1867. Yes, provincial constitutions are called for. Yes, the same division of powers and some others in variations are made available to all Canadians if a premier with a lieutenant governor enacts them, but they never did. There's never been any civil rights or any real human rights, let alone any comparable natural rights you're born with that all American citizens get, and even today now all African American citizens get. No Canadian gets that. I mean, the first class get that. They get exceptional rights, which brings me to BLM Canada, and now the fallout with BLM America. You see, BLM Canada wants those exceptional rights. They want the Crown House Negro appointed positions that elected officials make, like they did for AFN in Canada, like they do all over for many different races and cultures. Now BLM Canada wants that too. There's even a fight right now, and they're going to try to usurp ECOSOC this fall after residential school genocide. They're going to try to jack that and turn that investigation into Canada's genocidal heinous crimes against all the First Peoples, the residential school children, the Indian Act, and everything of dehumanizing all First Peoples in Canada, even till today, as they have no civil and human rights, and they're not defined as human beings. They are forbidden from any of the state powers or any of the provincial powers, the division of powers. All of it is removed from the Canadian First Peoples. They are not allowed to collect taxes. They are not allowed any real industries. It's very limited to what the federal government will allow them. They don't give the power of a state government or provincial legislature to them. Not like what has happened with the American Indians. Now, BLM Canada is trying to get Crown Powers, a superior person in a class structure pyramid, everything against what Malcolm X told you all in his speech to the grassroots in its entirety. He teaches you revolution. He teaches you about Landlord and Landless. He teaches you about House Negro and Field Negro. If you've never seen it, and you profess to be BLM Canada or USA, you need to go through that and look at that, because if you don't do that, you're not a commie, you're not any of these other things. Marxist, Leninists are fighting for the African American people. You're fighting for a crown, which is absolutely against everything that is America, and America will never go to. It's against everything that which is that of American independence and all the great achievements America's done since that time and growth. Do they have sins of the past? Sure. But all of those sins still exist in every single constitutional monarchy. And if you're trying to get the position of House Negro at the detriment and expense of all your people, meaning the Field Negroes, you're in big trouble. You're doing exactly what Malcolm X told you not to do. And he explained it to you so very well, probably better than I ever could, but I get it. I'm a Canadian and I get it. That's my video. I hope it finds a lot of people well. I'm making this video not just because I want it for all Canadians and First Peoples, and not just because major threats and a major headbutt's going to come with residential school genocide, and of course a Canadian BLM attempt at taking Crown by throwing the First Peoples away. Not on my watch. And also one more thing for BLM America, you're going to have to look at the treaties and what was finished with the First Peoples whose land this is. And you're going to have to look at the 155 American Indians constituted and the major land settlements they have and their status as American Indian citizens versus all the rest of you, African, Asian, East Indian, we can go on and on, Latino, Caucasian, doesn't matter. There's just two citizens in America, two equal but important citizens. That's my video. I hope people look at it, see it for what it is. I'll load it on YouTube, and we'll see what comes. Bye now.